In the previous exercise, we were getting comfortable working with Photoshop's panels or palettes. We saw where we could find a full list of all of Photoshop's panels as well. There's a couple of extra neat little tricks, neat little productivity options that I want to bounce off of you related to working with panels. Before I show you that, though, I completely neglected to mention way down at the bottom of the Photoshop interface in the previous exercise, mini bridge and timeline. So what we can do, just like we saw with our main set of panels, we can double click, for instance, on the mini bridge tab, and that opens up the mini bridge panel. Now, to actually make use of the mini bridge panel, I have to launch Adobe Bridge, which I'm not going to do at this time, but just giving you a sense of how this works. And the same goes for the timeline as well. Okay, and then double click on either of those palette tabs to reduce them back down to their normal mode. So what else can we do here in terms of productivity, in terms of working faster inside Photoshop, things like this? Check this out. Try hitting your tab key on your keyboard for me if you would. When you tap your tab key, and by the way, that's a toggle, try hitting your tab key again. What the tab key does is it disables or it temporarily turns off the options bar across the top, the toolbox on the left-hand side, and of course the panels over on the right-hand side, and even mini bridge and timeline down at the bottom of the screen as well. So a handy little trick there for you. Maybe you want to be able to have the most amount of screen space possible as you're working along inside Photoshop. But of course the trick is now that I have everything turned off, how do I go and access, for instance, some of my tools? Well, way back when we talked about the toolbox, and I gave you the tour of the toolbox, I mentioned some keystroke shortcuts. For instance, the B key to access the brush tool. Well, I just tapped the B key on my keyboard, and now I have the brush tool activated. Or perhaps P for the pen tool. Well, now I'm going to go and create a vector path with the pen tool, right? This is all happening without the toolbox even being available to me on screen, which is fantastic, and this is a really fast, productive way to work inside Photoshop. Let me show you something else here. First of all, I'm going to tap the V key on my keyboard. That takes me back again to that neutral tool, my move tool. And I'm going to tap the tab key on my keyboard to bring everything back to life, right? And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to hit the tab key. And what that does is that keeps the options bar across the top of the interface, as well as the toolbox running down the left-hand side of the interface, active or available, and it simply disables all of the panels, right? So maybe you still want to have your toolbox, you still want to have your options bar available to you across the top of the interface, but you want to get rid of your panels and have the most amount of space available to you. Again, Shift Tab, and it's just again a toggle. Shift Tab over and over again will turn your panels on and off, again while keeping the toolbox and the options bar available to you. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to set yourself up as I have my screen set up here. So I hit Shift Tab to disable the panels. Now what if I want to temporarily access some of my panels? Well, many of the panels, much like the tools, also have keystroke equivalents. Try this. Try hitting F7 on your keyboard, and that will activate only your Layers panel, or I suppose to be a little bit more specific, the Layers panel group. In other words, the Layers panel and any other panel that happens to be grouped with it. Okay? And that, again, is a toggle. Try hitting F7 again, and that will shut your layers off. Try hitting F8. That'll give us our info panel, a very handy panel, by the way. And again, that's just a toggle. Or let's try F5 on our keyboard. That's our brushes, right? So once again, I don't know them all, but I know the ones that I use all the time. And if I head to the window menu, we can even start to get a sense of some of these shortcuts. There's F5 for brushes, F6 for colors, F8, and so on, right? So you'll notice that not all panels have a keystroke shortcut, but many of them do. So there you go, just some neat extra productivity techniques that you may want to make use of inside Photoshop. Now notice, I've gone and hit the Tab key to bring everything back to life, and I'm missing my Layers panel. So I better hit F7 on my keyboard to bring Layers back to life. There you go. Pretty cool productivity techniques.